I've been working the late-night security and maintenance shift at a massive, isolated shipping port along the coast of Oregon for nearly 8 years. If you've never been to a shipping yard at 3 Mile AM, it is an incredibly eerie place. Imagine rows upon rows of towering metal shipping containers stacked 4 stories high, creating dark, narrow labyrinths where the cold ocean wind howls and whistles through the steel gaps. There are 0 human sounds out here, just the groaning of metal, the crashing of waves against the concrete docks, and the dim, yellow glare of a few industrial floodlights piercing through the thick coastal fog. It was a freezing Thursday night in November, right around 3:15 a.m. My primary job during this stretch of the night was to drive a small security golf cart to the furthest perimeter fence. Gate 4. Gate 4 was an old, rusty iron entrance that hadn't been actively used in over a decade because the road leading to it from the main highway had been completely washed away by a landslide years ago. It sat completely isolated at the very edge of a dark, dense pine forest. My only duty there was to ensure the heavy padlocks were intact and that no local kids had cut through the chain link fencing. The fog was particularly brutal that night, clinging to the ground like a thick white blanket. I parked the golf cart near the final row of containers and walked the remaining 50 yards to Gate 4, carrying my heavy industrial flashlight. The silence was absolute. As I approached the rusted iron bars of the gate, I shone the beam onto the heavy steel chain. The lock was securely in place, frozen over with a thin layer of ice. Satisfied, I turned around to walk back to my cart. But the moment my boots crunched on the gravel, a strange, low sound echoed from the dark woods directly outside the gate. Thud, thud, thud. It sounded like multiple people walking slowly through the thick brush. I stopped, turning my flashlight beam back toward the dense tree line. The powerful white light cut through the branches, illuminating the pale bark of the pine trees. Who's out there? This is private port security. You are trespassing. I called out, my voice echoing over the distant sound of the ocean. No one answered. The heavy thudding footsteps stopped instantly. I kept the light fixed on the woods for another 30 seconds, but saw nothing except the swirling fog. I assumed it was just a family of deer or a stray bear coming down from the hills. I shook my head, walked back to the golf cart, climbed inside, and turned the key. Nothing happened. The dashboard stayed completely dark. The battery was completely dead. I groaned, pulling out my heavy-duty company 2-way radio from my belt. Control, this is Unit 3 at Gate 4. My cart's got a dead battery. Can you send the maintenance truck down with a jumper cable? Over. There was a sudden, violent burst of static from the radio speaker. Crackle. Shh. Unit 3, this is Control. State your location again. Over, a voice replied, but it didn't sound like Mike, the guy who was supposed to be running the dispatch desk tonight. The voice sounded incredibly distorted, thin, and hollow, like it was coming from deep underwater. I'm at Gate 4, right by the forest line, I repeated, getting annoyed. Send the truck. The radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't words. It was a rhythmic, high-pitched scratching sound, like someone dragging long, sharp fingernails directly across a microphone grill. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Then, a sudden chill ran down my spine. The scratching sound wasn't just coming from the radio in my hand. I could hear the exact same scratching sound coming from the metal roof of the shipping container, sitting right next to my parked golf cart. I slowly raised my flashlight, my hand trembling violently as the beam hit the top edge of the 4-story metal container, standing right on the edge of the rusted steel roof. Looking directly down at me were 3 tall figures. They were wearing plain, dark, tight-fitting clothes, but their bodies looked completely wrong. Their arms and legs were unnaturally long and thin, bent at strange fluid angles that didn't look humanly possible. But the most terrifying part was their faces. They were wearing identical, porcelain white masks with no features, just 2 perfectly circular black holes for eyes and a small, painted red dot where a mouth should be. They didn't jump down. They didn't shout. They just stood on the edge of that towering container in the freezing fog, their long, thin fingers scratching rhythmically against the corrugated iron. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Suddenly, the 2-way radio in my hand burst into life again, the volume blasting at maximum capacity. We are at Gate 4. Driver, come. Outside. The gate. The distorted underwater voice droned from the speaker. I dropped the radio onto the floorboard as pure panic overtook my mind. I didn't care about the golf cart or the company rules anymore. I scrambled out of the seat and began sprinting as fast as my legs could carry me down the narrow, dark lane between the towering rows of containers, heading back toward the main office building a mile away. As I ran, I could hear the terrifying sound of heavy, rapid thuds echoing from the roofs above me. They were leaping from container to container, following my movement from the shadows above. Every time I glanced up, I could see those pale, expressionless white masks glancing over the steel edges, tracking me like predators. I ran until my lungs felt like they were on fire, my boots slamming against the cold concrete docks. I didn't stop until I burst through the heavy glass doors of the main administrative building, slamming my weight against the door and locking it from the inside. Mike, the actual dispatch officer, jumped up from his desk in shock, looking at my pale, sweat-drenched face. "What the hell happened to you?" he asked, reaching for his radio. Before I could answer, the massive security monitor on the wall, the one linked directly to the security camera at Gate 4, flickered violently before cutting to a crisp, clear feed. The camera showed my abandoned golf cart sitting in the fog. Standing around the vehicle were the 3 tall, distorted figures. One of them was holding my discarded 2-way radio up to its blank white porcelain mask. It slowly raised its left arm and pointed its long, thin index finger directly at the camera lens, as if it knew exactly who was watching from the monitor. The real police arrived 20 minutes later with heavy firearms, but by the time they reached Gate 4, the figures had completely disappeared into the dense pine forest. The only thing they left behind was my security radio, smashed into pieces on the gravel, and deep, unnatural scratch marks carved into the thick steel roofs of the containers. I quit my job that very morning. I don't care how much they offer to pay for the night shift. Some places are hunted by things that use our own technology against us, and I am never stepping foot near that shipping yard again.